polyvagal was theory was postulated by a chap called Stephen Porges, and his book is pretty thick and very academic, so I wouldn't recommend it, but there's definitely other versions around that make it more simple for anybody who wants to have a read about it. But basically, it's talking about the autonomic nervous system, and the autonomic nervous system can be broken into, firstly, it can be broken into two branches. Is the sympathetic system, which we've talked about a little bit, and then its opposite is the parasympathetic system. And the parasympathetic system can then be divided into two elements. You've got which is part of the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve has the ventral vagal, and then there's also another element to it. It's called the dorsal vagal, and it's all related to where they are in relationship to the body. And the autonomic nervous system and this polyvagal theory pretty much controls nearly all aspects of our biology in a sense. So like the sympathetic system is when that's online, is you working with the muscles, that impacts the eyes, the breathing, the heart. So everything of the polyvagal system impacts all our organs inside our body, and also impacts on our muscular system, and basically how we relate and socialize with people. So, and it's an evolutionary model in the sense of that the dorsal vagal is the oldest part of our system. I think it's like started developing in animals 800 million years ago, and that's basically the freeze response. Back then, and to some degree more primitive animals now, when they encounter another animal similar, maybe in the same species or a threat, they just hold still, right? And so that obviously didn't work as we got more complicated and more evolved. Just staying still usually meant that you were going to get eaten. So then over a period of time, hundreds of millions of years, about 500 million years ago from memory, the sympathetic system evolved in animals and in mammals, and more in reptiles, I suppose, developed in them. And that was all about the fight flight. So if something got close to you, it wasn't one of your own, you either swam off, ran off, or you'd fight back, bite or do whatever you needed to do to escape.
Let's just put context just for a second. 500 years ago was before there were even trees.
Okay.
So this
all right. Okay.
And 300 million years ago was when, 250 million years ago was around the time of the first dinosaurs and bees and houseflies. So this is a system that's so ingrained within the biology of our development that's been around since before we've seen trees. You had shrubs.
Yeah, because it's in the oceans, so it developed in the oceans. Animals in the oceans. Yeah, so really primitive. I can't remember the names of the various types of creatures, but yeah, I'm only repeating what I've heard and read.
I think it's really important, because we can get lost and bogged down in like hundreds of millions of years. But like if we say, okay, well, this has been around since before we can even imagine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. So we can say the first system is very, very old. Then the second system is really old, and then the next system, the ventral vagal system, is more evolved with the onset of mammals, and so that is about 200 million years old, I think. And so with mammals, what happened with mammals, what was different from other species was that they learned to have more familial group herd, like herds, sort of families, and where the mammals looked after their young. And so because of that evolutionary step, you had to remove the fight response in a sense, because most animals up to that point weren't very friendly with each other. They would either attack them or eat them. So to have families or to live in a herd, you've got to have a system in a sense where you can tolerate and be around other animals of your same species. So the ventral system evolved in animals, so it allowed, the parents, so to speak, to raise their offspring, and all allowed animals to be in large herds in their own species, and without the idea that they're going to eat them or attack them or whatever it is. And so that obviously developed in humans to a higher degree, in the sense the ventral system is to do with social engagement, and is pretty much more related to the face. and how, because we're so face orientated. And so we read information, all that, as you were saying back before about that split second of how we interpret our environment. Humans do that a lot through the face. And so we read each other's face. And so how the face is would send messages to our nervous system, whether that person's friendly or not. And that's the first thing. So if you meet a stranger on the road, the first system that gets activated is the ventral vagal system. So you're checking out if this person comes at you with a smile, their eyes are reflecting that smile, they've got eye contact, they're more animated in their face, and they've got a general greeting. That's the ventral vagal system that's in play. And then that you see that, or you're doing that, and that has the same effect on them, then you know that other person's not a threat. Then take it to the next level. It's like I said, if somebody comes along to you with a hoodie on and you can't see their eyes and their face is more flat, more expressionless, that then can activate the sympathetic system, which then readies you for the fight-flight response. And that's the next level type thing. And then then you do get into a fight-flight situation and you realize you're going to get overwhelmed by this person. They're bigger than you, stronger than you, whatever it is, you can't escape. Then you might go into the oldest part of this evolutionary process and freeze, because that's your best survival chance. In that, might not, but it's your better one than fighting back or trying to run, because then you definitely get hurt more, like I said before. Yeah, I think that's given a bit of a summary.
I think you gave an excellent summary on the development of these systems and considering how they affect each of our responses in terms of fight, flight, freeze. Let's consider what ventral and dorsal vagal mean, because up until relatively recently, in the grand scheme of things, I had never heard of these systems. So what is the vagus nerve? Where does it come from? And what is the ventral vagal? What is the dorsal vagal?
All right. Okay. Now you've got my biology going now. So basically, the vagal nerve is Latin for vagare, I think it is. So it's like vagabond. It means the wanderer. So it's the longest nerve in the body, and I think it starts in the back of the head, and then it's distributed through either the vagus nerve. I think it's dorsal, because the dorsal sits at the back, more at the back, and the ventral vagal is more at the front. So I think that's why they've named it dorsal and ventral. But this basically, so the ventral vagal then basically controls, well, part of its functioning is, like I was saying, it's like our facial expression, and also helps control the regulation of the breathing and heart rate. And so it's generally situated and governs from a heart diaphragm, above a diaphragm and above, whereas the dorsal vagal controls the organs and the viscera below the diaphragm, and is its healthy functioning is around digestion, that type of thing.
So dorsal, is that like a dorsal fin, like at the back of the vagal?
Yeah. Dorsal means the back. So if you think of it, that's how I envision it. So like the dorsal fin, So I think it's just where it's located. Yeah. So it's more at the back. So if the dorsal's here, the ventral's in front, where they start in the brain.
That makes sense. So ventral. It's so weird because it is biology.
I could have got that wrong, but it's something like that anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what I found was really interesting. I did a bit of digging into the parasympathetic nervous system response, and what we often see is that the vagus nerve comes straight out of the brainstem, that very primitive part that you were describing, and it branches out to the rest of our kind of body in terms of the torso. But then you've also got the facial nerve, which is also one of the cranial nerves that regulate the parasympathetic nervous system. And then you've got the oculomotor nerve, which is the one that controls the motor neurons behind our eyes, which is also a cranial nerve that regulates the parasympathetic nervous system. And it's so
right.
I think there might be another one that I might be missing out on, but these three you can like work in tandem with different strategies, isn't it? Where it's kind of like eye
Sure.
movement strategies, or things like regulating the facial muscles, and also the body-based strategies, which I want to get into soon. But uh, in terms of the parasympathetic nervous system, you mentioned that that's the system that calms the body down when it's feeling really activated, and the
Yeah.
sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that gets the body ready for action. And they all come out from the autonomic nervous system, which is
Yeah.
basically that part of the nervous system which regulates all our heart breathing, heart blood pressure, all that sort of stuff that we're not in control of. And they
Yeah.
come out of the peripheral nervous system, which is regulated by the nerves throughout our body.
Yeah.
And that's comes out from the nervous system, which is basically brain, spinal cord.
Yeah.
And
The central nervous system. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
you've got the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system, which I just
Right.
wanted to break that down, because it's really, we get bogged down in these details on, okay, we might understand the autonomic nervous system or parasympathetic, but then
Yeah.
where does this all fit? What's the gestalt, to use your term?
You've asked a question I can't answer. It sounds like you have more knowledge than me, so maybe you could talk to the viewers about that. I don't know I don't know exactly what the relationship is 100% between the autonomic nervous system, as you say, in the peripheral, and then the central nervous system. How they all interact, that's kind of like not in my pay grade at the moment.
Well, I think you can speak to the practical elements of these, though, because along the way you've taught me so many different strategies around working with
Right.
the nervous system, and this all fits within it. So I'd like to just
Okay.
go into that one, because you might not have the at the moment, you might not be conceptualizing it in that way, but this is what you're doing, and your practical
Okay.
experience of it is really, I think it's
Right.
really useful for our listeners to hear. So tell us a bit
Okay.
about, how do you work with the nervous system?